You open a map app on your phone. You zoom in on a random patch of ocean just to see what's there. A coastline appears, a name appears, coordinates lock into place. You trust it instantly because why wouldn't you? Maps are facts. Maps are the one thing that isn't supposed to lie to you. But in 2012, a team of Australian scientists sailed toward a real place, marked on real charts, cited by real governments, and used by real software companies for years. It was called Sandy Island. It appeared on French maps. It appeared on British Admiralty charts. It appeared on Google Earth, shaded in that unmistakable blue-black that means solid land sitting in open water. It even appeared on the so-called World Vector Shoreline Database, a dataset the United States government itself relied on to define coastlines. The ship sailed to the exact coordinates, and there was nothing there. No island, no reef, no sandbar breaking the surface, just 1,600 meters of open, empty, unbroken ocean. An island that governments had mapped, that pilots had avoided, that geography textbooks had quietly accepted as fact, simply did not exist, and it hadn't existed for a very long time. To understand how a landmass gets erased from reality while still existing on paper, you have to go back over a century to a time when maps weren't made by satellites. They were made by sailors, squinting at horizons, sketching what they thought they saw, and trusting the charts that came before them. In 1876, a whaling ship called the Velocity logged a landmass in that stretch of the Coral Sea. The captain noted it, marked its position, and moved on. That single entry, one man's word, one moment of possible fog, possible cloud shadow, possible floating pumice from a nearby volcanic eruption, was copied onto the next official chart. And once something is on an official chart, something strange happens to human behavior. Nobody questions it anymore. Cartographers don't resurvey land that's already been confirmed. They copy it forward, generation after generation, chart after chart, until a phantom becomes permanent. Sandy Island bounced from British Admiralty maps to French hydrographic charts to, eventually, digital databases that were built by simply digitizing the paper maps that came before them. By the time satellites were orbiting the planet and photographing every inch of it in high resolution, Sandy Island had already been real for over 100 years. Nobody rechecked it because nobody thought there was a reason to. It was already true. It had been true for so long that truth and habit had become the same thing. And Sandy Island isn't alone. Cartographic history is full of these ghosts. There was Bermeja, an island charted off the coast of Mexico for 400 years, cited in international treaties, used to help define maritime borders, and then quietly found to not exist when anyone actually looked. There was Antillia, the island of 7 cities, drawn on maps for 3 centuries, before the age of exploration finally proved the ocean where it should have been was empty. There was Thompson Island in the Antarctic, mapped in 1825, still appearing on charts as late as the 1930s, and never seen again by anyone who went looking. These weren't hoaxes. Nobody set out to lie. That's what makes them so unsettling. A single misread shadow, a single tired sailor, a single moment of certainty gets copied by people who trust the person before them, who get copied by people who trust them, until an entire structure of shared belief is built on top of a mistake nobody ever double-checked. Here's where the mystery deflates a little, and where it should. Sandy Island most likely began as a genuine, honest misreading of a floating raft of pumice, porous volcanic rock light enough to float in sheets so large they can look, from a distance, exactly like a low, sandy shoreline. The South Pacific had a documented pumice raft event in the exact era the island was first logged. A tired eye, a rolling ship, a shape on the horizon that behaved like land because it was solid enough to reflect light the same way. One log entry. 1 century of unquestioned repetition. That's the twist that mystery shows love to skip past, and the one worth sitting with. The story isn't that something supernatural erased an island. The story is that human institutions, ones built entirely on trusting the last person's work, can manufacture a fact so convincing that governments build policy around it, that software companies encode it into their maps, that pilots quietly reroute around empty water for 100 years, all without a single person going to check. And that should make you uncomfortable in a very specific way, because it isn't really about an island. It's about how much of what you accept as settled, permanent, and true was actually just copied forward from one uncertain moment by people who had every reason to assume someone, somewhere, had already checked. Somewhere on the maps you're using right now, whether it's the coastline of a small country, the population figure of a distant city, or a statistic quoted so often nobody remembers its original source, there is probably at least one sandy island, a shadow on someone's horizon copied forward until it became a fact. The ocean where Sandy Island was supposed to be has been empty for over a century. The only thing that ever lived there was certainty. And certainty, it turns out, doesn't need to be true. It just needs to be repeated. So the next time you zoom into a map and a name and a coastline snap perfectly into place, ask yourself the question those Australian scientists never expected to be asking on an ordinary research voyage. Is that really there? Or has everyone just agreed that it is?